here's a story for you. Monday morning, I'm an hour into preparation for this sermon, and a familiar face walks through the door at Starbucks. Hadn't seen this woman in a while. She comes over. Hey, I said, it's been a while. What are you up to? Yeah. And her whole demeanor kind of changes. She gets a little bit closer. Her voice goes down. She goes, well, I've been through a season. I had cancer, have cancer, just finished my last round. And it didn't shock me, because in just a few moments whenever she walked in, you know how this is, I'm looking at her face and I'm like, what? She looks different. Like, is her face more pale, or like, is it thinner? Is her hair different? They go, you know what? Because it's all happening very quickly. And she'll come into the Starbucks to meet clients, and almost as soon as she tells me that, her client walks in. Talk about an awkward time to abruptly stop a conversation. So afterwards, she comes back and she fills me in. And I meant this sincerely. I said, I just want you to know, for whatever it's worth, you always have the most beautiful spirit about you. Every single time I talk to you, you're just such a gentle person. And she smiled and she says, all I know is that I really do believe that there's purpose in pain. It's interesting, because at that point, being an hour into the sermon, I already had passages that I was pulling. And I'm thinking about how that's a beautiful statement, and it is true. So let me go ahead and just confirm that's true. But not everyone immediately understands that. Good men and women in our biblical text. You remember this accuser, this Satan, that comes before God in Job chapter 1? And Job tells this being, where have you been? Well, walking to and fro on the earth. Have you considered Job? That he's blameless and upright. There's no one like him. He fears God. And Satan says, well, yeah, because you've blessed him. You've blessed his hands, everything that he does. You've put a hedge around him. But take that away, and he'll curse you to your face. Actually, God allows that to happen. His whole clan is ripped away from him in a day. His wife, you remember, just cursed God and die. He says, are we going to accept the good from God and not the bad? The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But as he's sitting in that, and he's trying to rationalize it, he does get to a point, and it's uncomfortable to read, but here it is. He says, though I am in the right, I cannot answer him. And can I just say something? In context, he's trying to understand, what's the point of all this? Have I done something wrong? I'm not rebellious towards him. I'm not rebellious towards him. This isn't making any sense. This should not be happening to me. I'm in the right. And in that sense, he was in the right. This did not happen because God was trying to teach Job a lesson, repercussions of sin. He says, I must appeal for mercy to my accuser. If I summoned him and he answered me, I would not believe that he was listening to my voice. For he crushes me with the tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. I know one thing, she says, I believe in purpose and pain. Job goes, really? Because I don't know what you're talking about. So this is difficult. We begin to ask these questions, big questions. Why is this world broken? Okay, like Well, you got people, okay, so then why'd you create me? Quite frankly, I didn't ask to be created. Sorry, I'm going to go ahead and say out loud things that people who have suffered have thought. I didn't ask to be here. That's my problem, Lord. You know, if you wouldn't, this tree. Okay, so then you got people, they're in the world, but you introduce a tree. And there's the problem. And whenever you introduce the tree, we've got sin and then we've got repercussions. So why'd you put the tree in the garden? Here's what I'm not talking about this morning. We learn things through suffering. Jesus learned obedience through what he suffered. But I'm not even talking about that this morning. There's many aspects to suffering. I'm also not talking about, though we're going to mention it, to try to give some explanation. I'm not talking about the suffering that you endure because you transgress the law of God. Listen, there are consequences to our actions. I'm not talking about that this morning. I'm talking about primarily, and this came from a study that I had with one of you last week. And by the way, as I've told you, I'm ready to study. I've got about 5 or 6 more studies. Guess what? I want some more. So let's talk about life. Let's talk about God. This is good. It's profitable. You encouraged me. I'm hearing what you're going through. I'm talking about whenever just life happens in this broken world and we're suffering because of it and it doesn't make sense and we're trying, how do I react to this? Okay? And what I want to say right out front is that the angle that I want to consider suffering, this angle of suffering, is not going to take away necessarily your situation, your circumstances. It's not going to make you feel good, but hopefully offer another angle to help you endure what it is that you're going through. That's what I'm talking about. And this is going to go fast. But I don't want you to mistake the shortness of this sermon for the depth of how it affects your life, okay? So, yeah, why is this world broken? It is the consequence of sin, right? And you know how the story goes. And so Adam and Eve broke his law. And now we are introduced to a holy and just God. And he cursed. Listen, childbearing was going to be hard for Eve. Working was going to be difficult for Adam. The world is literally cursed. God says, you came from dust, you're going to return to dust. Paul tells us in Romans chapter 8 that even the whole creation, the physical earth, is groaning, waiting to be liberated. I'm tired and I'm worn out and I want it to be done with. We're living in a broken world. You're like, I get that. But they didn't ask to be put in this world. Adam and Eve didn't ask for that. Okay, and I know this seems so common sense, but if you're like me, I have to be reminded sometimes of simple observations. How can God counsel with something that's uncreated? Number one, he doesn't have to counsel you. But even if he wanted to, how do I ask something that doesn't exist what they think about it? And so now we come to this realization that he decides to create us. Do we trust in his character for creating us? Shall we look at God and say, right, I get that, but he knew what would happen and he's evil. We got to take a moment before that thought starts getting into here. Let me turn the tables. So you, whenever you decided to have child, shall we call you evil now? Well, I didn't know things like God knew them. Yeah, but you knew your child was going to suffer some kind of pain in their life, right? I mean, you don't know that. You're the most naive person in the world. So you bring a child into the world knowing that they're going to suffer injustice and pain, things that they do, but things from other, yet you bring them into the world. Oh, no one thinks that. No, people do think that, by the way. There are people that think that you're wrong for bringing children into a world depending on what era you're living in. It's a thing. And you would look at that and you say, my decision to do that was in love. And I would say, that's right. Even though you're limited in what you could do, God creates this with He has all power and ability. So He can create, and even though there's pain, He can sustain and save. You can't even do that. So He can't ask you. He couldn't have asked you. Okay, but why the tree? The trees are critical, and here's the main point of this angle of suffering that I ask you to join me in. Trees are critical. I'm not saying there wasn't a literal tree. I believe there was a literal tree in this Garden of Eden that God told them, don't eat of it. The day you eat of it, you shall die. What was it about the tree? That's not the point. It is a representation of choice. That tree, for all I know, could have looked like every other. That's not the point. God says, so here's a tree, don't eat of it. And the moment that He does that, He introduces sincerity. I can create you, but if I'm going to do it, I want it to be real. And if I don't create you with the ability to make your own decisions and even the opportunities to carry out bad decisions, then what we have here is not authentic. So I gave you a tree. You know, whenever you go back to Job, look at this. So all of the kids just gone in a day. His wife cursed God and die. But he's holding fast to his integrity, right? But the accuser comes back, round 2. And we're in Job chapter 1. Again, there was a day, Job chapter 2, verse 1. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, and here's the same verbiage, from where have you come? Satan has answered the Lord, from going to and fro on the earth and from walking up and down on it. And the Lord said to Satan, here he goes again, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? He still holds fast his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason. Do you see that? God's even acknowledging, without reason, you wanted this. But he's still holding fast his integrity. Satan answered the Lord, skin for skin. All that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he's in your hand, only spare his life. There's bad blood between this accuser and God. Pay attention to what's going on here. There's an interesting conversation. Satan comes up, God's going, where have you been? From going to and fro about the earth. You notice Job? No one like him. No one like him, accuser. No one like him. No one like him. You know who does what's right? Who has reverence for me? You've blessed him. You've blessed him. Take it away. Hey, where have you been? Going to and fro again, huh? See Job? No one like him. Even though I allowed this, no reason. Skin for skin. And here's the thing, Satan's right, because I don't know at what point this is in our history, but it's enough for him to already get a good idea of mankind. And here's what he knows. Some people will sacrifice for others. But a lot of people, Billy's class on individualism, whenever it comes to my needs and securing what I need, I will totally sacrifice you. I mean, and I've got a podcast that I listen to where this guy just goes through real everyday stories. That's what's for me fascinating, just insane. And people betraying their own family, killing their own family because there's something they need or they were getting in a pickle. I can't go down, you're going to go down. I'm going to take you off the face of this planet so I don't have to bear the consequences for my actions. Satan knew skin for skin, and the guy's going to turn on you. And I can't help but wonder that Satan's projecting here a little bit. You know, Satan does not follow God like Job follows God. And Satan is interested only in himself. And what Satan knows is that this is the way most people go. Skin for skin. Listen, this didn't happen for a reason, yet it happened for a reason. God was not trying to teach Job a lesson. God was making a point to the accuser that there are beings that are created that will hold fast to a sincere relationship with me, unlike you. Here's my question. Is God worth the pain? If your suffering is a reminder of a genuine relationship, but let me put this another way. If you want God to take away all the pain out of the world, He's got to take you out of it. If you want there to be no suffering in the world, God has to rob you of your free will. Am I clear? So let me ask this again. Is that what you want? Is God worth your suffering? I'm not interested in just giving that was an interesting sermon. Thanks, Sean. I feel good. I'm going to go here, and I'm sorry because this is going to be expense of my dear sister's emotions. Reagan, would you go back and have John again? So she's saying yes. Do you understand what we're talking about? Do you feel the depth of this? So it's a Garth Brooks song, The Dance. And he's actually grappling. Like, man, I don't know if I would have done this. It's better to live it up to chance. I could have missed the pain. He said, but I would have missed dancing with you. I hate country, but that song's good. So, is it possible to suffer graciously? How do we do that? Paul, he had this thorn in the flesh, and Satan was trying to harass him. God was trying to keep him humble. He talks about this thorn in the flesh. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content. And this is a consequence of Paul living in the world. I'm content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities, for when I am weak, then I am strong. He realized that Christ's power is seen in my weakness, and it is good and it's beneficial for others. And I want to emphasize that, but I want to go deeper. Paul believed that, but it wasn't just about others. Paul said, indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth, and this phrase is meaning more and more to me as I go along. The surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish, in order that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own. And that's a moment too as he's writing, because he remembers that though I go through these things, yet I have transgressed God, and I'm saved through him. Not a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection, and may share in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, that by any means possible I may obtain the resurrection from the dead. I want to be with him. And I'm okay with giving up all these things. And I'm okay with being a nobody. And I'm okay with going through it because I know him. And knowing him is worth it all. And the more I know him, the more I'm ready to suffer with him and for him. The more you know of him, the more willing you are to suffer for Jesus. And when I say for Jesus, I don't mean because he needs something that's lacking. I mean to suffer to get to him. I'm okay because we've got a free will, authentic relationship, and I know what I'm in for, and it's worth every moment of it. Every moment of it. I hate sin like you do, and I hate that I've sinned, and the consequences and how I've hurt others. And I'm still not through that. I do it still. And I hate the sin of others. And so in that sense, I wish that there were things in my past that never occurred only because they transgressed against my God. But I regret none of the deep lessons that he has taught me and the way he has molded me and how I've come to know him. That's what I'm trying to say. Because Jesus suffered first. And he said it. The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and on the third day be raised. Suffer. If you want to do a word search, search it. And that's what's attributed to him. Isaiah 53, I'm not going to read it if you know it. It's the suffering Savior passage, like a sheep that is led to the slaughter, so he opened up his mouth. He wasn't anything to look at. We didn't think anything of him. When we saw him on the cross, we esteemed him rejected by God. You know, he's just nothing to write home about where he comes from. It's just, who is he? Well, he was the guy that never did anything wrong. And took on, he suffered so God wouldn't punish us. The one person that can genuinely say, never once have I suffered for doing wrong. Pinned to a tree. But as you read through Isaiah 53, the question is, why? But why did you suffer that way? You know, you've noticed how they call the crucifixion the Passion. Was anyone ever confused why they called the movie The Passion of Christ? What does that mean, the Passion of Christ? Passion comes, it derives from the Latin translation of the Greek term, suffer. That's all it means. Passion just means to suffer. When we think about passion, we think deep emotion. But whenever you go back to its original idea, it's like suffering. But then you put it in context, and Jesus is saying, I am willing to suffer for someone I love. Because if I don't suffer for them, then I can't have them. And so I leave you with Jesus' comment. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. And Jesus says, and you're my friends if you do what's commanded you. Would you rather him not suffer? Would you rather Jesus not suffer? And now I want you to think about all the implications. If he doesn't suffer, you weren't saved. Or if there's no suffering, there's no authentic relationship. So, listen, I'm done. This wasn't about taking away the pain. It's not about taking away the realities of what you're enduring. But it is a reminder of how to be the people that we are. How did the disciples in Acts 5, how are they beaten and they're rejoicing? Because they were just glad to suffer along Jesus Christ. Billy had Matthew 5 passage and 6 in his class this morning. How do I go an extra mile with someone? How do I give them my tunic? How do I turn the cheek? You know, some people turn the cheek just because, and understand the way I say this, because they're actually just scared. They're cowards. They don't care about anyone else. I'll turn the cheek so I don't get slapped 5 times. I don't know. But then there are some people who willingly go into situations and they suffer purposefully. They suffer on purpose because they're not offended, because they choose to have this relationship with Jesus. Hope this has been an encouragement to you. If you need to respond to the gospel, do so right now as together we stand.